claiming the exemption actually lives there. So even if we include corporations and LLCs, does that not limit them to the residence they live in as the owner? And I would also agree with you that we need to tighten up some of the language on the outlying houses. If I'm renting a house, I'm not paying property tax. So I've never rented a house and had to pay property tax. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, so on page 3 where it talks about primary residence, so the person that's filling out the application, the claim for the application, is stating that they live in that residence, and in this case, 8 months out of the year. The owner of that residence is the corporation that they are a shareholder in. The house down the road is the exact same scenario that their brother lives in, that he's filling out the application. It is his primary residence. He lives there 8 months out of the year, but that house is owned by the corporation of which he's a shareholder in. That's where the question comes in when we're trying to define owner. They're both meeting the qualifications of it being their personal residence for the qualified amount of time. The question is, the owner is the same for both houses, and it's not their name. The owner is the corporation or partnership or LLC that owns both of them. They just reside in them.
That's an interesting viewpoint on this. If I own 50% of the stock in a corporation, am I not a 50% owner? It's just set up that way for tax purposes. But if they own stock in it, aren't they an owner? Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that was the intent for the language when you defined owner in this bill. But then in the language in the law, it says the owner can only have one exemption on the property. So that owner is the corporation on the deed. It's the shareholder on the application. Two different entities in our legal world, because that shareholder's name is not on that deed. It's XYZ Corp. So all we want is clarification. I'm willing to do it. We're willing to grant this on both of those. That's not the question whether we think it should or should not. We just need clarification so that we're doing it consistently across the state. The other question we had was land, and it's a very similar question. So if you have a house that's on a lot, but you own 4 lots adjoining it, maybe 2 on each side, is the intent, because it speaks to the land as saying associated, includes associated residential land up to 35 acres where the dwelling is located. In a case where the land is sitting on a 30-acre tract or a 40-acre tract, and there's no subdivision or there's no legal division of land, it's just a, for lack of a better word, a meets and bounds description or a township and range. That seems to be fairly clear. The exemption is going to be for up to 35 acres of whatever they owned. The question has come in, my house is sitting in lot 3. I also own lot 1, 2, 4, and 5. I want the exemption to apply on all of those. I'm going to file an exemption request for all of them, even though they don't have a dwelling on them. But in the taxpayer's mind, it's associated. So just some clarity on that. I believe with the department's guidance, we can probably administer that to say if there's not a dwelling on it, that land is not going to be granted for the exemption. But it does make some murky water for the taxpayer, because they think that lot in the back where they have a horse is still associated with their house, but it's a separate subdivided piece of property. It's its own lot. So that's some clarification that we would ask for. And then lastly, moving forward, if this is to be an ongoing exemption, we would suggest some language that would mimic the language in the Veterans Exemption Program, where they don't have to file the completed application every year. We've got counties that are doing 3,000 plus applications. If there was a process where, like in the Veterans Exemption, they can call in and say, nothing's changed, I'm still living here. We know that they haven't sold the property. We could grant them that exemption without going through the formal filling out all that application would be helpful for the taxpayer. And certainly for us, time that takes up time. So we would ask that you consider just that language somewhere down the road that it mimics what we're doing with the veterans so that they don't have to fill out that entire application every year. And with that, we would stand for any questions. I have Assessor Berg here with me from Fremont County, and she's got some of the same issues that we have. So if you have any questions, she could probably answer some of those as well.
Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you possibly complicate it a little more? No, I understand your concerns. I think the intent of this was a residential property, if you owned it, you know, I really question if you have 5 lots and you have a house on the center lot, that the others apply. I just don't think that was the intent of this. That's just my personal opinion, so.
Mr. Chairman, Cinder, and there are several that concur with that thought process, but when you use associated land, it tends to let them being the taxpayer interpret it a little bit differently. So I'll try not to complicate it anymore if we don't make any changes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I don't have anything. I just followed Dixie up here to make sure she covered everything. She always does, though.
Thank you for coming in and testifying. Do we have anybody else?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on the position. Look forward to working with you, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. We'll establish formal positions next week on things, so I'll have something more concrete for you then. But I too want to focus on the repeal that exists in the legislation. A few things that are giving pause to many of us is, one, the increasing and unknown fiscal impact of this particular legislation. Last year when you passed the bill, there was a fiscal note on that of $10.7 million. Based on the number of applications that have been submitted, the department has indicated that impact could perhaps be as large as twice as large, and could go up potentially based on applications that come in over the next few months. This bill alone for fiscal year 27 and beyond indicates a fiscal impact of $31.5 million. So with that repealer in there, we're really repealing this before we actually have hard figures, which we'll have a little bit later this year for you as those exemptions are applied. And I would just suggest that you don't actually have to repeal this yet. You could do it next session when we have those better hard facts for us to make some decisions around. I'll just re-articulate a point that we made last year when this legislation was being considered, our belief that there should be some sort of parameter put or condition eligibility put around financial hardship, because not everybody needs this particular exemption. I know some of you on this board have indicated that you qualify and will apply, and I don't disparage anybody that is. It's an exemption that exists out there, but you don't need it. And I know that there are many out there. Would certainly, if you're going to keep the repealer in there, we'd ask that you might consider some sort of backfill, particularly for those jurisdictions that might be hit the hardest from this particular decision. I'm thinking of hardship counties in particular across this state, some of which may have a significant number of individuals that qualify there for this, and they simply just don't have much of a budget anyway from all of the various taxes that are available to them. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll pause there. I'll get you a more formal opinion or a position of our association just as soon as I possibly can, but I wanted to at least articulate those things to you this afternoon.
Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we want to go down the road of, well, you deserve this, but you don't. And you kind of do, but boy, you're borderline, and we'll have a committee decide whether you get it or not. I think that's a dangerous road for the legislature or anybody to go down. I mean, how do you determine that? I mean, in last year, or during the interim revenue committee, when we discussed the getting rid of the sunset date of the 2 years, it was, well, how can we give a benefit to seniors that have been there 25 years, paying for 25 years? They helped build the community. They helped build that hospital, that fire hall, that whatever, that library. How can you give that to them for 2 years and then yank it away from them? I disagree with that, because everybody adjusts their living dependent on their income. And the 8 months down to 6 months, I know I had a lot of, my parents, I'll just use my parents, God rest their soul. They hooked their little pickup to a little bitty Airstream trailer and had it out in October down south somewhere. It was always picked some other different place, you know, to where it was warm. They didn't like the wind and the cold, and they might be gone for 6 months and a day. Well, or maybe 7 months. They weren't about to, you know, they qualified, but they weren't about to lie to the assessor and say, hey, geez, we were around for 8 months, you know. It just, you know, all that time they're down in some paying to park their little trailer at some parking place down south, they're paying property tax on their property for the whole year, the whole time. It's not like they weren't. I mean, you don't get to pay property tax on a house and then, oh, we're heading south. No, you're not gonna pay. Oh, when I come back, oh, I start payment again. That's not the case. They pay year round. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to get to a question. Why is the repealer such a bad thing? And you may have addressed it, or going from 8 months to 6 months. Well, I don't get it. Oh, thank you. There's your question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator French, let me start with the 6-month provision. I'm not here to dispute that particular provision. I really am not. My focus, again, is on the repealer. And if I can just provide maybe a couple of examples there. I have a commissioner that will talk about this example, and she may get the chance to do it before this body, before you're done. She qualifies for the long-term homeowners exemption, but she'll share the story of the single father across the street from her, 2 young children, who is doing his darndest to make it day to day, and doesn't qualify for the property tax refund program, doesn't qualify for any other program, and she just doesn't see, why doesn't he get that benefit? Why do I just get it because I was here paying for 25 years? He's the one that needs it more. in her example. So that's one example that I might bring to you. My wife and I are on the verge of having paid property taxes in this state for 25 years on 2 different properties. I don't qualify for any of these programs. The only difference in this scenario is that some people are 65 years old. I've got to wait 20 more years before I get to that threshold. So I'm just suggesting that having some sort of a financial assessment to qualify for this, no different than our property tax refund programs, might be something to consider, simply because you have 2 things in play. One, local government revenues, the services that we can provide from those revenues are being impacted, and to a degree we don't know about quite yet because we don't have a firm grasp of the fiscal impact of this legislation. And 2, all of those individuals are receiving services from their local government. So sure, they paid property taxes for 25 years like I did, but we still have a responsibility to the greater good of the community. With that, Mr. Chairman, I stand for other questions.
I do want to clarify one thing.
Yeah.
This is only one piece of 3 pieces of legislation. So the single father with 2 kids, will be covering that in a different bill, but there is relief for, the goal is to give relief for everybody in the state in one form or another. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that.
Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ryman, next week your county commissioners are getting together to talk about this bill, and probably the previous version of the bill. And I know that backfill will be on that discussion. Is it also possible they will discuss litigating this bill? Bringing a constitutional challenge to the original bill from last year?
Mr. Chairman, at this point, we've not discussed that as an association. Is it possible? Sure, but at this point, we've not.
And Mr. Chairman, there is some, I don't know if you were familiar with the letter from Jane Mockler at the State Board of Education that went to the governor when they were asked to certify the property tax values. I provided that letter, and I think it's going to be with the committee materials on our website. But that seems to provide a pathway for litigation. And I would think that, I'm not a lawyer, that the standing would be determined by someone that would receive taxes and then not receive taxes. Or it could be a homeowner that's disadvantaged after it goes into effect. But I'm just wondering, I suspect it'll be litigated in any instance. And I'm kind of of the opinion it's better sooner than later if the courts will accept it. And I don't know if you guys are talking about it, but thanks for clearing me up on that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm aware of Ms. Mockler's letter on this issue. I do commend it to anybody's reading. It's worth the time to consider the points that she makes. Certainly there is the question about, one, yes, the Constitution is very clear that you have the ability to provide exemptions. There's also that fair and equitable portion of the Constitution, and that goes to the position that I suggested relative to my own personal situation of being a like taxpayer, but not getting a fair and equitable treatment in the exemption side of it. So there could be a challenge, but as I suggested, we have not discussed that internally at this point in time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Welcome to revenue.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I'd like to offer a couple thoughts for you. Boy, I tell you, sitting here listening to this, the phrase "the devil is in the details" comes up right in front of me. So Godspeed, you guys. But I'd like to offer you a thought. Governor Gordon just talked about people coming into the state because they like the Wyoming lifestyle environment and they didn't like the state they came from. And so you're trying to solve a couple problems here with these kind of things. What do you do with a guy on a fixed income who's lived in his house for many, many years and the taxes are rising up underneath him? But the second issue, which is another kind of inflation, is the bidding up of property values because of those people coming in. I mean, we're seeing things out in, I live in Bondurant, Sublette County, but go down to Jackson quite a bit. Property values there are such that now when they build something in Jackson, they're using gantry cranes because they can't go out, they have to go up. And so those are indicators of the problem you're trying to solve is how do you help those people out? And I campaigned this past summer in Kemmerer, Opal, Bear River, and Evanston. And there's places down there where you have people living that are in the permanently mounted trailer homes. And they're probably the most susceptible to being pushed off their property as the taxes go. So good luck there. I'd like to offer you another thought. We're looking forward at building this nuclear plant in Kemmerer, in the Kemmerer area, and that's going to bring you an influx of nuclear operators. And now we've just had a note that Rocky Mountain Power may not shut down that coal plant that's there that we thought they were going to shut down. That brings with it some problems separate. So you're going to have an influx of people beyond what we thought we were going to have. Again, you run into the problem of bidding up of prices. But if the door knocking I had is any indication, there's some real problems with infrastructure in Kemmerer, sewer, water, etc. That I guess they have been kicking the can down the road. Well, that's going to cost money, and how do you fund that? And I'd like to tie that back. When you talk about nuclear operators on that plant, they need to have safe, secure homes so that when they go into their plant for their shift, they're well rested, they're not concerned about how their family's going to be taken care of. And right now, you have people living in Opal and Bear River that work at that coal plant because they didn't like the environment that they saw in Kemmerer. And so you run into all of that. And you know, like I said, devil is in the details. Good luck, but I'd like to keep those things, top level things in the back of your mind as you try to solve this problem. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Any other takers? Do we have one online?
No, Mr. Chairman, no one online.
Okay, I think with that, we'll close testimony and work the bill. So committee, what's your pleasure?
I'll move the bill.
I will second it.
Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Pappas.
My concern, again, with the bill, obviously, is with the repealer. There's a reason why I supported the bill last year, because it had a repealer. I probably wouldn't have supported it if it didn't. I really don't think that, we haven't even gotten given it a chance to even, we don't even understand what's gonna happen, and I agree with Mr. Freeman. I wouldn't mind extending the repealer. I mean, extending the date. But to take it out completely, would make it a no-go for me. So I would entertain, the ability to change it. But if we take out the repealer, there's a reason we put it in last year. We haven't seen yet what it's gonna do. I think we're jumping the gun, getting rid of it. Just my 2 cents worth, my thoughts. Thank you.
Yes, Senator Case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm of the opinion that the bill we passed last year was not constitutional by our state constitution. And I think there are two main reasons for that. The first being is this notion is it doesn't create full value, and it creates these differences between homeowners in different situations, which arguably is an equal protection argument. But in terms of it's impossible to have two pieces of property that are exactly identical, one that comes under this scenario because of these happenstance of the owners, meaning they've lived in their property, they're a certain age, blah, 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 that has a different full value than another property located right next door where the owner doesn't share those same differences. That's a difference in owners, not a difference in valuation that the Constitution requires. The Constitution does allow us to create exemptions, but that is limited. It's Section 12 of Article 15, and it talks about the exemptions, but there's a very powerful word at the very last sentence, and the word is such. And if I could read it, it's not very long, but it says exemptions from taxation. The property of the United States, state, counties, cities, towns, school districts, municipal corporations, when used primarily for a governmental purpose, which was just litigated at the Supreme Court, and public libraries, lots with buildings thereon used exclusively for religious worship, church parsonage, church schools, and other public cemeteries shall be exempt from taxation. And such other property. That word such is a very powerful word right there. Senator Scott would hate having such in there, I might add. And such other property as the legislature may by general law provide. The word such tells you what kind of things can go into an exemption. And it doesn't allow for exemptions to be like willy-nilly, like you get an exemption because you're so-and-so. Another part of our Constitution allows for necessary support of the poor. But I don't think that there's any evidence that person 65 who's lived in the house and probably has it paid for is poor and comes under that part of the Constitution. There's no finding. So the original law was unconstitutional. This law that modifies it remains unconstitutional in my mind, and I can't, in good faith, vote for it. Last year, I declared a conflict. I was kind of being tongue-in-cheek, and it was the first one in the whole deal, and all of a sudden, a third of the Senate has declared conflicts on this bill, and that was kind of fun. But when I declared a conflict, I also knew that it was essentially a no vote. So for the purpose of this committee, I could go either way. I certainly am conflicted because I've lived in my house. The property taxes are way too excessive, and my assessor is very hard on me. And but I will just vote no because of the constitutionality. And I do hope it's litigated. It needs to be litigated because we have exceeded our bounds. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just one other point.
Senator Pappas?
Just one other point. I too, I believe it's frankly discriminatory. And however, with the sunset in it, I was okay. I was one of them that went ahead and voted for it, even though I do qualify for this exemption. You know, the older you get and you don't move around a lot, you qualify for these things, and I certainly don't need it, right? I probably have, you know, I have a 6,400 square foot home. I probably pay more taxes in my county than most folks. But, you know, I'd be foolish not to take it, right? But I don't need to. And so I think, I agree with Mr. Reaman, there's probably some kind of a hardship thing that should go along with it. But we didn't do that. And so, again, I'll be a no vote basically because of the repealer, getting rid of the language to have a sunset date.
So you're a no vote, not a conflict? Okay. Go ahead, Senator French.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to vote yes on this. This started out in the initial stages as a way to help those on a fixed income. That, and to a comment to Mr. Ryman, yeah, maybe he's paid taxes on a house nearly 25 years, and he's got to wait a few years until he hits 65. Well, myself, I've been paying property taxes on houses for over 50 years. So there's a lot of folks out there that have been paying for 50, 60 years. They, like I said earlier, they help build these communities. They help build these fire halls, everything in the community, hospitals, you name it. How much did they pay for the schools? Maybe they didn't have any children. They paid for 50 years for education. They didn't have any kids. So it was designed for that. And what really triggered it, I was at the Senior Citizen Center in Powell, and a lady, I mean, it's pretty tough when an elderly person comes up and is bawling their head off because their property taxes went up and they're on a fixed income. The husband has passed away. They got very, very little income and their taxes are going, and bawling their head off to you. Please do something, because I'm gonna have to move away. I'm gonna have to sell and move out. And they've helped build that community. They're friends, everybody's there that they've known for, maybe they're 70, 80 years old, whatever. Now they're yanked from their community because there's no help out there. So that's kind of where this all started, in an effort to help those folks. Now, does everybody possibly need it? No, probably not all, but I think this is overall a needed thing. We give exemptions to all kinds of stuff, all kinds of different areas. They have exemptions to taxation or whatever. So I'm in full support of it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I like the bill. I've taken some notes on some of the considerations and concerns. And I'd like to see us take it up to the floor and work on a couple amendments if we're really concerned about the constitutionality. In my mind, that's a double-edged sword. It's not constitutional because it's part of a group. But if we put in an income test, is that not dividing the group too? Probably the hardest part of talking about these things and exemptions is it's really difficult to get to fair and equitable. What's fair, what's equitable? And we'll try, and we'll keep trying, but I think we're always going to fall a little short on the fair and equitable. So I'm probably going to be a yes on the bill, because I'd like to get it to the floor, because I think there's a couple things we can change and help the bill out. And that's pretty much my comments on it. Thank you. Call the roll, please.
This is a roll call vote on Senate File 67, long-term homeowner tax exemption revisions. Senator Case? No. Senator French?
Aye.
Senator Ide left an absentee vote of aye. Senator Pappas?
No.
And Chairman McCune?
Aye.
Right. We have 3 aye, 2 no, Mr. Chairman.
Looks like that will make it up to the floor. It passes. And I think we'll adjourn, but I would like to talk to everybody on the committee after we adjourn, if that's possible. It's adjourned.